They said the kingdom was finished, not weakened, not wounded, finished. Its walls were cracked, its fields burned, its people exhausted by years of war and cruelty. Mothers whispered prayers over empty bowls. Merchants packed what little they had and fled. Elders stared at the ground, ashamed to remember what the land once was. And in the middle of this ruin stood a young leader, crowned not in celebration, but in crisis. No cheers, no faith, only silence and doubt. Many believed he would rule over ashes, remembered only as the one who inherited failure. But what they didn't know was this: he was about to rebuild everything, not with fear, not with conquest, but with transformation. When he first walked through the capital, the streets were quiet in a way that felt heavier than noise. Broken stone lined the roads like scars. Burned homes stood roofless under the sun. Soldiers guarded corners not with pride, but with fatigue. Advisors urged him to act fast, to raise armies, to punish rebels, to show strength before enemies sensed weakness. But something inside him resisted. He had seen enough destruction. He had seen what force without wisdom could do. And in that moment, surrounded by ruins, he made a decision that would change everything. He chose to rebuild the kingdom from the inside out. Instead of retreating behind palace walls, he walked among the people. He listened to farmers who had lost 3 harvests in a row. He listened to widows who had lost sons to wars they never understood. He listened to merchants whose trade routes had collapsed and teachers whose schools had been burned. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He listened until the pain of the kingdom became his own. And that was the first turning point, because real leadership doesn't begin with commands. It begins with understanding. The people were suspicious at first. They had heard promises before. They had seen leaders speak of change while feeding on the nation's suffering. But this leader did something different. He acted. He redirected resources away from luxury and into survival. Wells were dug. Roads were cleared. Grain was distributed. Schools were rebuilt before monuments. Hospitals were repaired before palaces. And slowly, something unfamiliar began to return. Hope, quiet at first, fragile, but real. Still, the tension remained. Neighboring kingdoms watched closely, waiting for collapse. Rebels tested his resolve. Corrupt officials resisted change. Clinging to old power, there were nights when even he wondered if it was possible. When reports of unrest reached his chambers, when resources ran thin, when progress felt painfully slow, but instead of reacting with rage, he responded with discipline. Instead of crushing opposition, he confronted it with justice. Officials who stole were removed. Those willing to change were retrained. Laws were rewritten not to favor the powerful, but to protect the weak. Then came the moment that defined him. A region long devastated by war erupted again. Advisors demanded force. Generals demanded blood. The old way would have been easy. But he remembered the cost of violence. He remembered the ruins. He chose another path. He traveled there himself, unarmed, and addressed the people directly. He acknowledged their suffering. He admitted past wrongs. He promised reform and followed it with action. Land was restored. Debts forgiven. Representation granted. And what could have become another war became a turning point of unity. Trade routes reopened. Diplomacy replaced hostility. The kingdom began to breathe again. Markets filled with voices. Instead of fear, art returned. Music returned. Children returned to classrooms. Farmers planted knowing they would harvest. And the people began to change too. They took responsibility. They protected what was rebuilt. They believed again. Years passed, and the kingdom transformed, not just in appearance, but in spirit. It became known not for conquest, but for stability. Not for fear, but for fairness. Travelers spoke of a land where justice mattered, where leadership served, where even former enemies were welcomed as partners. The leader never claimed perfection. He spoke openly of his mistakes. He encouraged learning, reflection, and moral strength. He understood that a kingdom is not held together by walls, but by values. Standing one day on a hill overlooking the capital, now vibrant and alive, he reflected on the journey. This land had been broken beyond recognition, and yet it rose, not because of one man's power, but because of a shift in purpose, because leadership chose compassion over cruelty, wisdom over impulse, service over ego. And this is why his story matters, because fallen kingdoms are not just ancient lands, they are businesses that collapsed, families torn apart, dreams abandoned, lives that feel beyond repair. And his story reminds us of this truth: nothing is truly ruined unless you stop rebuilding. You don't need perfect conditions to begin. You need courage, patience, and the willingness to change direction. If you are standing in your own ruins right now, hear this clearly. Rebuilding takes time, it takes humility, it takes choices that don't look impressive at first. But if you rebuild the foundation, the future will rise stronger than before. Greatness is not born in comfort, it is forged in recovery. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of what leadership, resilience, and transformation truly mean, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that rebuild the mind and strengthen the spirit, because together, we don't just survive the ruins, we rise from them.